simply that the International Crane Foundation is not for or against a hunting season on sandhill cranes, but we do believe that science is an incredibly important and powerful tool to use to make the best decisions that we can about how a resource is used. And our comments are provided today to try and facilitate that decision-making process. That said, the proposal as it's currently been put forward, and as best we understand it, has a number of gaps in it that we would be concerned with moving forward with a crane hunting season until those gaps are addressed. And I'll try to briefly summarize the comments that I've submitted to you in writing. And after that, I'd welcome any questions or comments that you have. So I'm going on to the second slide, which should be a map of the Armstrong Bend in the river and crane locations. So what we tried to depict in this, and this is something that I sent in my comments, is that the locations of whooping cranes that are in the yellow dots are found in close approximation to sandhill cranes, which are the red circles, and the size of the red circle denotes how many sandhill cranes are associated with the birds. So in particular, when the birds are outside of the state wildlife area, their whooping cranes are very closely mixed with large numbers of sandhill cranes. This would brings up then the concern that there could be accidental shooting of whooping cranes because they're so closely intertwined, especially when they're outside of the state wildlife area. If I go to the third slide, what we tried to do is try to get an idea of how far outside would birds go. And these are data from whooping cranes that have a satellite transmitter attached to their legs. There's two different birds represented, yellow triangles and green circles. And when the birds they're used in the Armstrong Bend area substantially. When they're outside of that area, they tended to be less than a mile from the state wildlife area. Now, this is only a sample size of two birds. We think we have more ETT data on that from earlier winters. These are from the winters of 2010, 2011, and 2012, 2013. But we don't have access to that, but we will keep looking for or getting those data available to you if you wish. But the basic gist is if a buffer area were being considered around the Hiwassee area, a buffer area of about a mile from the state wildlife areas, which are hatched on the map, would probably be sufficient to incorporate most of the whooping crane locations when they're outside of the state wildlife areas. In general, it is very true that hunting seasons have occurred for quite some time where whooping cranes and sandhill cranes occur, but what's not quite understood is typically when that has occurred in the mid-continent population, hunting seasons have been closed once whooping cranes come into a particular area, so that when whooping cranes are temporally and geographically in the same place, there has not been much hunting of sandhill cranes to avoid accidental shooting of whooping cranes. In the situation at Hiwassee, extreme care would need to be taken because of the close approximation of sandhill cranes with whooping cranes throughout that entire area. And I don't know of an example where that's been done yet. And so trying to approach this in a very, very cautious manner, I think would be a prudent thing to pursue. And we don't know exactly what it would take to avoid accidental shooting, which I would guess that everybody in the room where you are is supportive of. None of us want to have accidental shooting of whooping cranes. Another point that we are concerned about in terms of hunting that is occurring around there so that you don't over-harvest from any of those populations. The symbols that you see on the map are areas from south central Wisconsin in our breeding area and where our marked birds have been. And what it does indicate is that our marked birds are spread largely throughout that area. You can see our marked birds have been seen at Hiwassee and at Wheeler and in Florida and so on. So from one breeding area, the birds are relatively spread out throughout those high density areas. And that is a good thing because it means that harvesting from Hiwassee would not necessarily over-harvest birds from one particular breeding area in Wisconsin or elsewhere. And I'll return to that point in a little bit. But there is a concern that the eastern population is not comparable to the mid-continent population, which is an assumption in the management plan. The other concern that we have is that the proposed plan is based on a 10% harvest rate for this population, but the population has not been modeled. The only model that's really been done is one that was based on the fall count survey, and the fall count survey is reflective of both an increase in the number of birds in the population, but also a very large increase in counting effort. Because the counting effort is increased at the same time as the population increase, it can't be used as a population model. I'm aware of no other population model that's been constructed, and without that, it's difficult to assess the harvest rates that are being proposed. A 10% harvest rate, we suspect, might be a problem, and the data that you're looking come from a breeding area that we've been studying for 20 years in south central Wisconsin. The red dots represent the number of chicks pledged to migration in each of the years that you see depicted from 1993 to 2012. The blue squares are the number of marked territories upon which these data are based. So if you look from 2003 to 2012, we roughly have 50 to 60 marked pairs. The reason why the marked pairs are important is that we don't underestimate or overestimate productivity because we have marked birds and we know that we're not double counting adjacent territories or undercounting birds that should be there that we do not detect. So they're very accurate data in terms of productivity. They suffer, however, from being from only one location, and we know that this location is not necessarily reflective of the entire population. Be that as it may, the productivity of this population has declined over the 20 years that we've been following it, and the current productivity of the population as gauged by 2012 was one chick pledge per 10 territories. Over the last 10 years, that average has been between 0.2 and 0.3 chicks per territory. So basically 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 5 territories is pledged to chick successfully. That's a fairly low productivity rate, and a 10% harvest rate would be exceptionally high for these productivity rates if they're at all reflective of the population as a whole. Few other data have been offered that talk about higher productivity rates, although we're sure that they vary when you look across broad regions. Finally, is the current management plan upon which the Tennessee harvest is based, is it really sustainable? And it's, first of all, absolutely possible to remove birds from the population on a sustainable basis. The real question is at what level would that harvest be at? The current eastern population is estimated at 80 to 90,000 birds, but the plan actually calls for no action to alter the harvest rate until the population reaches 30,000 birds. And it would be difficult to construe, and how the public construes a sustainable management of a population. A 2/3 reduction of the population would be very difficult to define as sustainable in any rubric of understanding in the plan, and therefore they are concerned. We fully understand that this might not be, that the plan might not be stating its goals as well as it might like to, but it is that plan upon which many other decisions that are being based, and it should be evaluated here. And finally, people have often raised crop damage as an issue that's very important, and that hunting can help solve. We have very few data, and no data actually, where hunting actually does solve effectively a crop damage problem. But more importantly, we have a lot of data to show that alternatives are working quite well. What you're seeing in front of you is a picture of an agricultural field, the untreated portion of the field being a lot less green portion of the field, and in this case, the green is corn seedlings that are coming up. We've found ways to treat seed that is planted that prevents it from being damaged by foraging cranes. And in Wisconsin, the amount of acreage treated has been extensive. In the next table, what you should see is an area of corn treated with anthraquinone, which is abbreviated AQ. In Wisconsin, from 2006 to 2013, there are we've gone from almost 38,000 acres treated to approximately 144,000 acres treated. So a substantial area is being treated, and at $10 an acre, the cost of treating with AQ, farmers are paying for this completely on their own. So it's almost $1.5 million that farmers are applying to this because they find the solution to be effective, and they like to have control over solving their own problems. Hunting doesn't offer the degree of effectiveness, nor does it offer the farmers as much control. So it should be evaluated much more carefully if hunting is proposed as a solution for hunting, because sending the private landowners that provide habitat for these birds with a solution that is not likely to be effective is a challenging sort of situation. Finally, there are a couple of things that people have said about hunting seasons that we do not believe are held true. So the next slide is a summer distribution of birds in the eastern population. And these data come from Breeding Bird Survey. As you saw with the winter distribution, within the circle that you see that goes through Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, up a bit into Ontario, 90% of the breeding birds, according to the Breeding Bird Survey, are located within that location, and the dark areas are the highest density of grain. So most of the birds you can see are located in Wisconsin, and then some in Minnesota, and in both the Upper Peninsula and Lower Peninsula of Michigan, and then a little bit in Ontario. The other dots are outside of the rest of the 10% of that population, and they're represented by actual nesting records that we have for birds. Those are individual nesting records. What it really says is that the core of the population is still Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and a little bit in Ontario and Iowa. These data, then if you look at the next slide and you look at the stars, those are places where we've captured flightless cranes and then received resightings of those data. And what you see is basically the birds from those dense breeding areas of Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Ontario, all pretty much move through the same flyway convening on Hiwassee. So, for example, if you look at Sherburne National Wildlife Refuge, the resightings that we've had has occurred in northeastern Iowa and at Jasper, Pulaski, of those banded birds. Just as an example to illustrate what the map means, the reason why this is important is it means, again, that there's little likelihood that breeding concentrations or breeding groups of birds are concentrated at Hiwassee or perhaps other areas in Tennessee, and so it would not likely be that any individual local population would be over-harvested by hunting at Hiwassee. So that high degree of mixing of the breeding populations is good news, because that spreads out your mortality across the whole population, which is what you want if the hunting season is put forward and implemented. Finally, people have argued that because cranes form long-term pair bonds, this is the final slide, has a picture of two cranes or two adult cranes and two crane chicks. Both of the adult cranes are marked. And these marked data have allowed us to assess if you harvest one adult from a pair, do you really lose two breeding pairs because the birds won't repair? And what our data shows is even though pairs remain together for long periods of time, a decade or two, my record is a pair that's been together for 22 years, and I've only been studying them for 22 years, so they're still going strong. But if you remove a bird from that population, they will very quickly repair, because in areas in Wisconsin, at least, the areas are quite dense and territories are at a premium, and so repairing process will occur very rapidly. So it is not true that if you remove one breeding bird from the population, you're effectively removing two. One important thing to keep in mind, though, is that when pair switches occur, whether because of mortality of the bird or because of a divorce, when divorces do occur, when mate switches occur, productivity is dampened for up to 3 years following that mate switch. So harvesting of birds might decrease productivity of the birds to some extent. So those are my comments. I hope I've been clear and stayed within the time limit that you've were hoping for. And if there's time, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And if possible, if the question can be asked, if somebody can repeat the question to me so I can hear it clearly. I didn't hear very well from comments through the room as a whole.
Thank you, Mr. Barzin. Very helpful. I'm not sure you can hear me or not. That's it.
That's it. Okay.
Is he not still available?
He's still there.
He's still there?
Mm-hmm.
We thought we might ask him.
I'm still here. I can't hear anything.
Just tell me we'll ask him questions now.
We're holding our question to the end, but in this case, since we may lose you, I'm going to ask if the commission has any questions they'd like to direct directly to Mr. Barzin.
Well, I think I understood him to say that,
Turn your mic on.
I don't think it works anyway, but there it's on. I thought I understood him to say that he can't say that our predicted harvest rate is too high. Am I correct in understanding that? He just was saying that we don't know, or he's concerned that we don't know.
Can you repeat that one more time? Clarify from him or from me?
From the gentleman with the,
Mr.
Mr. Barzin.
Can you repeat that question so I can relate to it?
Yeah, I thought I understood Mr. Barzin to indicate that he is not saying that our proposed harvest rate is too high. I thought I understood him to say that he's just not sure, or that the data's not there to tell us. Is that correct?
They want to know if the harvest data is.
Say again?
All right, guys.
That we're working off of from the plan of 10%, we think are clearly too high. The harvest rates as they exist, or at least as they're proposed for Tennessee, to the degree to which they fall within, if they are at 10%, we would feel that they are too high. The current harvest rates, as I understand them, probably are not too high if you just look at Tennessee alone, or Tennessee and Kentucky combined, because those are the only two states that are currently hunting sandhill cranes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it's 12,000.
Okay.
I guess the other thing I would venture would be that if other states then come in if the harvest rates are decreased, or as more states want to hunt, then the harvest rates would have to be decreased, and so you might be in a position of having to lower your harvest rates. Sorry, my voice is kind of giving out.
Mr. Barzin, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Chairman Jeff McMillan. I just want you to clarify one thing for us. We're getting conflicting reports on how many birds are on the refuge, and I know that Ms. Welton has indicated that the average is 12,000. We were under the impression that there was more like 30,000 last year. Is that not correct?
Is your question how many sandhill cranes are on the refuge?
Well, that would be coming through Tennessee. That would be involved in the hunt, because you keep referring to 10%, and I've not seen that figure of 12,000 before.
I'm not sure what you're referring to. I do not have any data regarding regarding the number of birds that are in Hiwassee.
You keep referring to a figure of 10%, so I'm assuming that you're thinking 12,000 if we agree to 1,200 permits. So I'm assuming you're saying there's 12,000 birds. I'm just confused by that.
It's, I think, in part because the perspective I'm coming from is from the management plan, which is the whole population, which is set at a 10% rate, and I'm less able to evaluate the individual states' harvest rate. So I don't know what your harvest or the numbers that your harvest is based at. So it's very difficult for me to assess it. But the overall rate for the whole population at 10%, we would say is too high. But since I don't know at what number you're basing the Tennessee hunt on, I can't assess that other than to go back to the whole population. Does that help clarify?
Yes, sir, I think so. I was assuming we were talking about just Tennessee, but you're talking about the entire flyway.
Well, nothing. Yes, this is the eastern population.
Which you're saying now is around 87,000?
It's somewhere between 80 and 90,000, correct?
Okay. We certainly appreciate you taking your time to talk to us, and I appreciate you sending the report that you did to us at the commission individually, and we all read that, and thank you for your valuable input.
You're welcome. Thank you, too.
Ask if anybody in the committee.
Question they'd like to direct to? Okay, thank you for your time. We appreciate all your information. I'm going to move forward. I guess stay on course. Is there anyone else who has not been recognized that would like to speak? What?
He signed in that he'd like to.
Yeah, there's several people that indicate on the sign that they'd like to speak. Why don't we do this? Why don't we, if anybody else in opposition to a crane season would like to speak, we'll take turns and come forward at this time.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Please remember, just come to this mic and state your name.
Hello, I'm Ed LeGrand. I'm a veterinarian from Crossville, and every fall when I see the cranes fly over, I marvel at them. Many other people do, of course. But when I look up there, I'm aware that we have family groups, we have mated pairs, we have young of the year with them. That brings up sort of an inconvenient moral issue. That as a veterinarian, I guess I'm the only one to say it because 2 years ago no one ever brought this up. Yes, when one is shot, there are others in the family left behind to suffer. As a veterinarian who went into pathology and worked in pharmaceutical development, I've certainly had my share of moral conflicts. I love animals, that's why I became a veterinarian. I love science. I love analyzing the data, coming to conclusions. Sure, I was able to justify killing laboratory animals in the hopes of making medical products that improve the lives of people and hopefully even animals. But it's corrosive. It's corrosive on people who do it. They're good people in the toxicology technicians. They're good people. It's corrosive. You have the same issues. You love wildlife and you love hunting. And you know what I'm talking about. You may not say it, but you know what I'm talking about. Cranes, because of their longevity and their lifestyle, the intelligence that comes with the long lifestyle, are different. To me, they're sort of like the monkeys and the dogs of the laboratory animal world. Yes, hunting can be justified, no question about it. And I know you all support hunting, and that's fine, as you should. But I don't think cranes are the species to go out with to enhance the cause of hunting. I think it's the wrong battle. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Front row.
My name is Axel Ringa. I'm representing the Sierra Club. You have received formal written comments from me already, so I'd just like to add some additional comments that weren't contained in my written comments. We do not disagree that, technically speaking, and from a biological standpoint, that the eastern population of cranes could withstand a hunting season. That's not an issue with us. What we would like to say is that the numbers miss the point. If hunting species were based strictly on the numbers of the populations, we would be out there hunting feral dogs and cats. We would be hunting red-tailed hawks. We would be hunting turkey vultures. We would be hunting a host of species that we do not, for one reason or another, choose to hunt. Hunting an animal is based on the perceived value of that animal to humans. It is our contention that sandhill cranes are more valuable to the citizens of Tennessee as a living resource than as a dead animal. It's a social issue that you need to be making a decision on, not a biological issue. Cranes, as has been pointed out previously, elicit an emotional response in people. They are seen as symbolic of the wild heritage of our land. They are beautiful, they are magnificent, they are graceful creatures while they are alive. When they're dead, they're another carcass. And we believe that they are best appreciated as living icons and as attractions for both the people of Tennessee and for people in other states that come to Tennessee to see these animals. One thing that I have not seen in the research that I have done or that has been mentioned in any of the comments and presentations here today is any studies on the behavioral response of sandhill cranes to hunting. Cranes are inherently a very wary species. When you start hunting them, what is that going to do to their behavior, specifically on the Hiwassee Wildlife Refuge, where their attraction to people relies on them staying there for people to watch? If they become tuned to seeing people in Tennessee as hunters, are they going to stay on the refuge, or are they going to dissipate and find other places where they might feel more secure? We believe that hunting will disturb their behavior and will be a detriment to their attraction as a watchable wildlife in Tennessee. And so we ask you to vote no on a sandhill hunting season. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Ben Yandell. I'm with the Kentucky Coalition for Sandhill Cranes, and I'm here to bring a slightly different perspective. I want to talk a little bit about the experience in Kentucky of going through this process and what I think it has done for the perception of our department in Kentucky. And that's all I'm going to talk about. I'm not going to talk about the biology or any of that other stuff, and I will be brief. I know that you heard from Commissioner Gassett about our process in Kentucky. I happen to respect Commissioner Gassett. We've had many conversations, but I have to disagree with something he said to you. He said that, yes, it was controversial, but he's not hearing about it much anymore. And if you weren't listening closely, you could get the impression that what he just said was, yeah, we went through this brief unpleasantness and now everything's okay. That's not the truth. He's not hearing about it because there's nothing to say right now. We're in the middle of a 3-year experimental season. And besides, if you're not listening, after a while, people stop talking to you. And that's what I'm worried about here. I want to just tell you a couple of quick things about what our process was like. I have to say that, again, and by the way, I just want to stop for 1 second and say thank you for what you do. I've had positions similar to what yours are, and I know it's sometimes not a whole lot of fun. And I appreciate your service, and I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate the professionalism that you're showing, and I just want to say thank you for that. And by the way, I will say the same things about the guys in Kentucky. Those are dedicated people. They're not evil people. And in fact, on most things, most of the time, we agree with what they're doing and how they're doing it. So I just want to take a moment to sort of let you know where we stand. And about our coalition, by the way, just so you know, I feel obligated to say this, it is not an anti-hunting coalition. We welcome hunters and non-hunters alike. We just were interested in trying to pool the voices of people who didn't want to see the Sandhill crane hunting season started. In Kentucky, it was clear from day one what the commission was going to do. And all of this hearing, and our poor commissioners had to go through exactly what you're going through right now. They sat there and they listened to a parade of people meander around different topics, and they mostly took it fairly patiently. But it was clear that the message, I have to say, the message to us, to the non-hunting public, was basically this in Kentucky. This is a private club, and you're not a member. And I submit to you, that's not a good long-term strategy, and that message is not a good long-term message. We could talk all we wanted to, but we had no voting representative in this process. So I submit to you, guys who do have a seat at the table, that for the rest of us who do not have a seat at the table, it doesn't feel very good to be excluded from something that you care deeply about. And as you've seen, people care deeply about Sandhill cranes. So, and by the way, I just want to be clear about something. I found when you talk about hunting that it takes about 6 seconds for somebody to twist what your words were, so I want to be sure you're hearing me correctly. I'm not saying that you don't deserve a seat at the table. Of course you do. Of course you do. I am saying you don't deserve all the seats at the table. And I guess that's one of the things that I feel like we learned in the process in Kentucky. I don't know your agency and I don't know your connections, so I'm not saying this about you. I'm trying to give you a chance to learn from what happened in Kentucky. So before you vote, I just have questions I would like for you to consider. What do Tennesseans see when they look at this agency? Do they see representatives of their interests, or do they see a private hunting club? And what do you want the relationship to be between this agency and the non-hunting public? Do you want a combative relationship, or do you want a friendly, collaborative, I'm listening to you kind of relationship? And I would ask that you vote against this proposal. And I would ask, before you decide how to vote, you think about the impact it has on the perception of this agency, which I know you'll do. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to talk.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Hey, my name is Anna Grabowski. I live in Meigs County. And before I say something, I've got somebody else want to say something. Oh, wait a minute. It'll just be a second. That there is a ringtone my husband recorded in our backyard. And I just wanted to say, okay, y'all hunters, that's okay. I'm a vegetarian and I don't hunt, but I don't have anything against people that hunt. My dad, bless his heart, it's gone 3 years now, and he hunted, and now this year the hummingbirds are just destroying my whole flower bed. My dad got a hummingbird once. I don't know if any of you can ever say that, and you can't prosecute him because he's gone now. But this one hummingbird would not leave the other ones alone, and he got it. My grandpa, who's gone 35 years now, lived in town, but he grew up in the country. And he came out of his house one time right there in town on the sidewalk, and a squirrel jumped out of the tree and landed on his head. Now, that did not set well with Grandpa. He went in, got his gun, and killed that squirrel right there in town. So, and I know people personally that need to hunt to live. I know a lady in southern Illinois that they live on deer meat in the winter, and she supplied my dad with deer meat too. You know, some people have a good reason to hunt. And there's some species that have a good reason to be hunted, like wild hogs that are doing damage, and even deer. And I love deer, but as a biology major, I know that they can do a lot of ecological damage. And I've gone and defended deer hunts before, because I can say to the people that are saying, well, don't hunt those deer. I say, well, you eat hamburgers and you eat pigs. So, you know, which is it? So basically I'm saying, I understand that some people want to hunt, but why do you have to hunt everything? You don't have to hunt something just because there's a lot of it or just because it's beautiful. In Meigs County, the Sandhill cranes bring something to that county beyond hunting. In the winter, it brings a lot of tourists. I've had a lot of people come from out of state to visit us to go see the Sandhill cranes. Now, in the summer, we get good tourism because of the lake and whatnot, but in the winter, that shuts down, and that Sandhill Crane Festival and everything brings in a lot of tourists. You talked to some people, you said, well, some people are saying that the Sandhill cranes are cutting down on they're competing with the other waterfowl, ducks and geese and whatnot. There's a simple answer to that: protect more habitat. Then you don't have to worry about if there's habitat competition. We should work together to protect more wildlife habitat. Then there'll be plenty to go around for the sandhill cranes and the ducks and the geese and whatnot. You said something about field checking to make sure that after they got shot that they didn't kill a whooping crane. So if someone brings in a whooping crane, what are you going to do, reanimate it and say, okay, fly away, whooping crane? No, that is not going to happen. So, you know, what's the point? It talked about educating people so they know the difference between whooping cranes and sandhill cranes. I taught for 5 years in Tennessee. Before that, I taught in Indiana and once in Arizona. I love the people of Tennessee, but it takes you all year to get them to understand basic biology or basic Spanish. I don't think a short course in telling the difference between a whooping crane and a sandhill crane is going to cut it. Because and I know a lot of good boys that hunted, but I don't think I could teach them the difference between a sandhill and a whooping crane. Nothing again. Not all hunters are dumb. I'm not saying that. But, okay. Next to finally, I think you should follow your own polling data and your own public input comments, which I know they broke it down and said a lot of them came from out of state, but there were 888 total against it. So if you follow your own public input and your own polls, you're going to vote against it. And, I noticed you're Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency, not Tennessee Wildlife Hunting Agency. There's more to wildlife, as you know, much more than just hunting. Hunting is going down in popularity because people generally don't need it to survive like we used to and people used to. And so as it goes down somewhat in popularity, and there are more people like me, vegetarians, just out there eating soybeans and stuff. So as it goes down, why would you want to do something that's going to hurt probably people are going to get mad because you're going to be killing something they love, a beautiful animal that isn't harming anybody, isn't harming anything. And so, what is to be gained from allowing a handful of people to go out and kill these critters? It's going to hurt hunting overall, which I guess I shouldn't have a problem with, because eventually then if people turn against hunting, but I don't think that's something you all want to do. I don't think you want to see the public up in arms and mad about it, which we're going to be. And And if anybody comes up later and says something in favor of this hunt that I have a reason to object to, I'd like to be able to come back up and say it. And thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
I'm going to follow her because she's short, too. My name is Janet McKnight. I live in Greenback, and Harold's my neighbor, I guess. I'm speaking at first on behalf of Cindy Rutledge, who couldn't be here today. Can you hear me all right? And I'm going to read because a public speaker I am not. When there is a difficult decision to be made, the time-honored, tried-and-true method of creating a list of pros and cons is quite effective for putting perspective and clarity to things. Cindy Rutledge generated this list. She could not be here, so I'll read it on her behalf, and I'll be very quick. The pros are 2. The numbers biology says the species can handle it, and the new hunting opportunity would be made in Tennessee. The cons, as you can see, very lengthy. The sandhill cranes are worth more as a watchable wildlife species. 62% of the Tennesseans surveyed do not want the hunt. There's potential damage to TWRA agency and loss of support and funds. Questions regarding the methodology used in the population surveys. There's a very narrow migration corridor. Sandhill cranes are family-oriented with a low reproductive rate. There's a chance of accidental shooting of a whooping crane. Whooping cranes and sandhill cranes are both present in the corridor at the same time. No documented evidence that the species needs management. Depredation permits process already exist. Hiwassee Refuge area is the second largest staging area for cranes, and the eastern population of sandhill cranes has never been a game species. No other species creates this kind of spectacle or has the enormous tourism potential as the sandhill crane, evidenced by the thousands of visitors attending the last 2 Tennessee Sandhill Crane Festivals. So that comes from Cindy Rutledge. Now from me, I just had this little thing I did. A couple of Saturday nights ago, I went to Market Square, and it was raining. And this Saturday night, raining, I just did an informal sidewalk survey. Anyone who is willing to stop and talk to me, and it's not easy to get people to stop and talk to you, especially when it's raining. They see a chick with a clipboard and they just keep walking and pretend like they didn't see me. But 36 people did stop and talk to me. And only 3 of those 36 people even knew about the hunt proposal. And 35 out of 36 said that they did not want to see the hunt. I just asked them 2 basic questions. Did they know about the hunt? Do they want to see it passed? 35 out of 36 said they did not want to see the hunt. If I had asked 36 of my like-minded friends these questions, I would expect those numbers. But these were 36 completely random strangers walking around Market Square on a rainy night. As commissioners, you represent all of the constituents, not just the hunters. And as per the mission statement of the agency, you represent to preserve, conserve, and protect the wildlife of all Tennesseans. And can a decision be made for all of the people in your appointed counties when most of them do not even know about this proposal, and most of them do not want the proposal if they do know about it? Are you willing to ignore the thousands of people against the proposal for the interests of a few? The sandhill cranes belong to all of us. If the hunt goes through, a very small numbers of hunters will be pleased at the expense of the wishes of most Tennesseans. And please let the vast majority rule on this.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Billy Cantwell, Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm president of the Knoxville chapter of the Tennessee Ornithological Society. I want to say thank you because I know you guys have done some concessions to the hunt. You lowered the bag limit, you lowered the number of take, you shortened the hunt, you've made it daylight time, and you've also want to educate the hunters, which would have to be done. So I want to thank you for that. But I also want to say that, again, the wildlife belongs to the citizens of Tennessee. And everything I've seen, and in your surveys, 8,800 who have written to you opposed the hunt, with only 185 support. KTUS is working actively to work together with TWRA. We are having a Hummingbird Festival on Saturday. TWRA will be there. You're sponsored. You have a booth there. Tennessee Wild's there, and Tennessee Wild Society is coming and do a program. So a lot is happening with wildlife right now, and people get excited to go out and see it. And that's what I think you've got a very hard decision to make. And I hope you do represent the citizens of Tennessee. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Eva Engstrom. I'm a resident of Knox County, and my wife and I operate a beef feeder calf operation in Granger County. I'm an engineer by training and a member of the Technical Society of Knoxville. I'm an occasional hunter and have enjoyed eating numerous different species of wildlife. However, when I became aware of the proposal to hunt sandhill cranes in Tennessee, my visceral reaction was that that is not right. As engineers are prone to do, I tried to rationally analyze why did I have such an emotional response to the hunting of cranes. And after considerable thought, I, like a number of other people here, came to the realization that I don't think of cranes the same way as ducks or geese or turkeys. When I think of a turkey dressed on the dining room table, my mouth may water. When I think of a dressed sandhill crane on the dining room table, I gag. Back in 1957, when I was in grade school, the Postal Service issued the whooping crane stamp. As a stamp collector, I was very excited about that, and remember that to this day that was one of the most beautiful stamps ever issued. And I also recall back in grade school when we had current events time that there were frequent reports of what was happening in the then extremely small whooping crane population. If a chick hatched, that got reported. Or if another crane was accidentally shot, that got reported. So, you know, I think a lot of people of my age just have this association that the whooping crane population was a great resource that came very close to being lost forever. I know that the work of government is to make very difficult decisions, but the goal should always be to optimize those decisions for the better good of all of the citizens of the state, particularly a proposal that doesn't serve any game population management purpose and only will provide 400 individuals at best the thrill of killing a sandhill crane would also, I believe, certainly cause me a great sense of loss, and I think millions of other residents of Tennessee a grave sense of loss. In our minds, the sandhill crane is not just another game bird. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that is against the proposed hunt that has any information that we haven't heard, information that might be important? All right, we're going to take a short pause for TV and then we'll